Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell adjusted the straps of her tactical vest, her eyes scanning the digital map glowing faintly on the small screen in her hand. The hum of the helicopter above the dense jungle was the only sound she allowed herself to hear. She had been briefed on the mission countless times, yet the anticipation never dulled. Intelligence had flagged a rogue paramilitary cell operating deep within hostile territory, well-trained, armed, and ruthless. Her team's objective was clear: gather intel, identify targets, and exfiltrate without leaving a trace. But Sarah knew better than anyone that in the field, nothing ever went according to plan. The jungle stretched beneath them like a dark, living carpet, shadows shifting as if sensing their presence. She could hear the faint crackle of leaves under the helicopter's downdraft, feel the weight of every decision she had made to reach this point in her career. She had earned her spot among the Navy SEALs through sheer perseverance, grueling training, and a relentless refusal to give up. Now, she would be tested again, but in ways no classroom or simulator could replicate. Sarah's team assembled silently around her, a blend of veteran operators and newer recruits, each carrying the weight of their own fears and responsibilities. There was Jackson, the sniper, calm as ever, whose steady hands could turn the tide of a firefight. Then there was Alvarez, whose tech expertise often saved them from traps they hadn't even seen coming. They all knew Sarah's reputation: fierce, focused, unbreakable. And yet she never let her presence intimidate. Respect was earned through action, not reputation. "Remember the plan," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the helicopter's engine. "Stick to the perimeter, observe, avoid unnecessary contact. We're ghosts until extraction." The team nodded, checking their weapons, securing communication lines, and reviewing the plan one last time. The moment they landed, there would be no turning back. Sarah's pulse quickened, not from fear but from readiness. This was what she had trained for her entire life: the delicate balance of precision, strategy, and survival under extreme conditions. Every heartbeat mattered. As the helicopter touched down, the dull thud resonated through the underbrush. Sarah led the team through the dense foliage, moving with practiced stealth. Each step was calculated, each sound measured. The jungle seemed alive, concealing threats that could emerge without warning. The air was thick, humid, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and foliage, masking their movements yet making each breath heavier. Her senses heightened, every rustle or distant cry analyzed. One misstep could spell disaster. Hours passed as the team navigated deeper into enemy territory. They found signs of recent activity: footprints, discarded equipment, and faint, almost imperceptible markings indicating the presence of hostile operatives. Sarah crouched low, examining the signs. "They've been here recently," she murmured, her eyes narrowing. Her instincts, honed through years of relentless training, told her the group was prepared for anyone attempting to track them. It was a dangerous dance, one miscalculation away from a confrontation that could end in death. Suddenly, the silence shattered. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, echoing through the dense jungle canopy. Explosions followed, sending birds scattering and leaves raining down like shards. Sarah reacted instantly, diving for cover behind a massive tree trunk, her team doing the same. Smoke, dirt, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. She fired a controlled volley, scanning for the attackers' positions. But they were outnumbered, and the ambush was executed with precision. Fall back," she commanded, her voice cutting through chaos. Her team responded with practiced coordination, retreating while covering each other's movements. Sarah realized that the enemy had anticipated their approach. Every route she considered for escape seemed blocked. The jungle, once an ally for concealment, now became a cage. Her mind raced, calculating options, predicting enemy moves, and analyzing weaknesses. But even the most experienced SEAL could be cornered. Amid the chaos, a strong hand grabbed her, pulling her off balance. She struggled, kicking and twisting, but a sharp blow to the temple rendered her momentarily disoriented. Darkness closed in as she was restrained, and her captors' voices echoed faintly in her ears, cruel and mocking. The realization hit her. She was separated from her team, alone in enemy hands. Fear whispered, but she suppressed it. She had been trained for this. She had survived worse. And no matter what they intended, Sarah Mitchell would not break. As she was dragged through the underbrush, bruised and bleeding, she silently vowed that this ordeal would not define her. The mission was far from over, and she had a role to play yet. Every Navy SEAL carries one unshakable principle: adapt, survive, overcome. She clung to that principle now, mentally preparing for what was to come, knowing the true test of her endurance had just begun. Sarah Mitchell awoke to a harsh, blinding light, her head throbbing with the force of a blow she barely remembered. The jungle's chaos had faded, replaced by the cold, metallic smell of an enclosed space. Her wrists and ankles were bound tightly, and she realized she had been moved. The faint sound of voices in an unknown language echoed around her, punctuated by the occasional sharp slap or command. She was inside a small, windowless room, walls damp and oppressive. Every instinct in her body screamed danger, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her captors stepped into view, silhouettes of men hardened by years of violence. They were paramilitary operatives, each carrying an air of ruthless confidence. Their eyes swept over her, scanning for weaknesses, calculating how quickly they could break her spirit. One of them, taller and bulkier than the rest, approached with a sneer, speaking in a language she didn't understand but whose meaning was painfully clear. He believed she would submit, that the shock of capture would crack even the strongest resolve. Sarah's mind, however, was already in motion. Years of SEAL training had conditioned her for captivity, for moments like this. Every sound, every movement, every word, even unintelligible, was data to be stored, analyzed, and used. She flexed her fingers within the restraints, testing for slack, measuring the strength of the ropes. Her breathing slowed, controlled, deliberate, masking any hint of fear. Fear could be used against her. Confidence could be weaponized. The torment began almost immediately. They mocked her, calling her names meant to insult and diminish. They circled her like predators, testing her patience, trying to see if anger or desperation would show. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and the room's stench of damp concrete and sweat made her nauseous. They offered water sparingly, then withdrew it, watching her struggle. Sleep deprivation began to take its toll, but Sarah leaned into it, converting exhaustion into clarity. She recalled lessons from Hell Week, where the body screamed to quit, yet the mind refused. She had endured worse, and she would endure this. Hours dragged into a torturous routine. Interrogations were punctuated by bursts of aggression, shouts, slaps, and the sudden bang of a heavy object against the walls. But Sarah remained unreadable, answering nothing, revealing nothing, showing nothing. Every time her captors tried to intimidate her with physical or psychological pressure, she observed, memorized, and planned. Her SEAL training emphasized patience and adaptability above all else. She had been conditioned to survive through endurance, to find weakness in the enemy through observation rather than brute force. Her captors began to notice something strange. Their confident sneers faltered at her calm. She did not flinch. She did not beg. She did not show the panic they expected. Confusion flickered across their faces. Hours of torment had revealed nothing. She was, to their surprise, still a formidable opponent, even restrained. Inside, Sarah ran mental drills, recounting every detail of her surroundings, every footstep, every sound. She cataloged every captor's tendencies, their reactions to movement, their dominant hand, the rhythm of their patrols. Each insult and blow was a piece of intelligence, a tiny advantage. She mentally rehearsed strategies for escape, recalling skills taught in survival, evasion, resistance, and escape training. She reminded herself that the human mind, when honed, could endure far beyond what the body suggested. Despite the abuse, she kept her mind focused. Her body ached, bruises formed, and fatigue threatened to cloud her senses, but she refused to submit. Inside, she ran calculations, devising small diversions she could use, ways to exploit her captors' arrogance and potential routes to regain freedom. Every pain inflicted upon her became a test of willpower. She reminded herself, no matter what, she would not break. As the first 24 hours ended, the captors paused briefly, exchanging frustrated glances. They had never seen a prisoner endure so silently, so completely. Sarah lay still, quiet, her body bruised but her spirit resolute. In her mind, the battle had just begun. She would survive. She would adapt. And when the moment came, they would discover the terrifying truth. A Navy SEAL's mind is unbreakable, even when the body is pressed to its limits. The second day of captivity had begun, and Sarah Mitchell's body ached in ways she hadn't thought possible. Every bruise and cut screamed at her, every muscle tensed from hours of restraint and exertion. Sleep had become a fleeting memory, a dream that dissolved whenever she closed her eyes. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, yet she controlled the urge to panic. Every moment of weakness could be exploited. She had survived extreme conditions before, raging seas, freezing nights, and brutal training, but nothing compared to the deliberate torment of human captors who thrived on fear. Her cell remained small and unyielding, the walls damp and suffocating. The dim light flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Her captors circled her like wolves, their presence oppressive, their stares hungry for a crack in her composure. Each time they entered, the air became heavier, the pressure palpable. They taunted her verbally, alternating between insults and threats of violence. Some grabbed her, trying to provoke a reaction, slamming her into the walls or forcing her into uncomfortable positions. But Sarah's training had prepared her for this. She breathed deeply, counting each inhalation and exhalation, grounding herself in the present. Pain was only physical, her mind was untouchable. Every SEAL drill, every survival exercise she had endured over the years played through her mind like a lifeline. She recalled lessons on stress inoculation, learning to use suffering as fuel rather than surrendering to it. Her captors had underestimated her. They believed exhaustion and fear could bend her will, but they had yet to realize the steel behind her calm exterior. Hours of observation taught Sarah more than any manual ever could. She noted the captors' patterns, the time they changed shifts, the sequence in which they interrogated her, their momentary lapses of attention. A slight twitch of a hand, a glance away, a sigh, tiny clues she filed away meticulously. She even noticed subtle tensions among the captors themselves, disagreements hidden beneath forced professionalism. Every detail became ammunition for survival. Her silence became a weapon. Frustration grew in her enemies while her mind sharpened with clarity. The physical torment escalated. They forced her to remain standing for hours, muscles trembling, sometimes dragging her across the cell for their amusement. Her stomach growled from lack of food, and the dryness of the air cracked her lips. Yet she endured, converting discomfort into determination. Every painful moment was a reminder of why SEALs train to push beyond human limits. The body may weaken, but the mind and resolve remains unbroken. Her captors, growing impatient, began introducing psychological games. They shouted false information, threatened non-existent dangers, and alternated between cruelty and feigned kindness to confuse her. Sarah noted every inconsistency, parsing truth from manipulation, remaining always one step ahead mentally. She whispered reassurances to herself. Endure, survive, observe, adapt. She had survived Hell Week, grueling deployments, and impossible drills. 72 hours of torment might test her, but they could not break her. Even as fatigue threatened to cloud her focus, Sarah created small mental exercises to remain sharp. She memorized every crack in the walls, every marking on the floor, every sound outside the cell. She rehearsed escape plans in her mind, calculating angles, estimating distances, predicting guards' reactions. The room became her map, the captors' behaviors her data. Every insult and slap became fuel, every threat a test she passed silently. By the second night, the guards' confidence began to waver. They could not understand how a single prisoner endured so much without breaking. Their frustration leaked through tiny gestures, a twitch of a finger, a tightened jaw, an exchanged glance of confusion. Sarah observed it all. Her mind remained laser-focused, alert, ready for the moment she would exploit. She felt her body trembling not from fear but from the strain of her mental and physical endurance, but she did not falter. Inside, she reflected on why Navy SEALs never truly break. It was more than physical training or tactical knowledge. It was the unwavering belief in one's purpose, the ability to endure extreme discomfort, and the disciplined control of mind over matter. Even in total darkness, restrained and hungry, she felt a fierce pride. Her captors might control her body for now, but the unbreakable strength of her mind was beyond their reach. As the first 48 hours of torment drew to a close, Sarah remained silent, resilient, and calculated. Exhausted but vigilant, she prepared mentally for the next phase of her trial. The captors had underestimated the wrong person. What they did not know, what they could never anticipate, was the fierce, methodical strength of a Navy SEAL determined to survive, no matter what the world or her enemies threw at her. The third day began with the same oppressive routine, yet something had shifted in the room. The captors, frustrated by Sarah Mitchell's unyielding composure, grew more erratic. They alternated between threats, mockery, and sudden bursts of violence, trying to break her resolve. Her body ached, bruises were now forming into dark patterns, and exhaustion pressed down like a weight she could not shrug off. Hunger gnawed relentlessly at her stomach. Sleep had become a fleeting phantom, only glimpsed in microseconds between interrogations. Yet, despite all, Sarah remained an island of control amid chaos. Every nerve in her body screamed for relief, but Sarah had learned long ago that discomfort was temporary, control was permanent. She shifted slightly, careful to avoid straining her restraints, and began analyzing her captor's behavior with precision. Patterns emerged. The guard rotations, moments of inattention, the way they exchanged glances before decisions. Each small observation was stored, cataloged, and added to a growing mental map of opportunities. She had survived extreme training exercises, and now she treated these hours as another drill, but with real stakes. Her mind, sharp as ever, converted agony into focus. She measured her body's responses to pain, calculating how long she could endure in specific positions without giving the captors any advantage. Every slap, every insult, every deprivation became data. Sarah silently rehearsed escape routes, possible tools she could seize, even improvising weapons from nothing. Her captors assumed her silence was fear. In reality, it was planning. The longest night of her life was turning into a calculated battlefield of observation, patience, and mental endurance. Sleep deprivation began to erode her physical strength, and her vision occasionally blurred at the edges, yet Sarah adapted. She used micro-rests, focusing on breath control, slowing her heartbeat and centering her mind. Pain, hunger, and exhaustion became secondary to one overarching truth: she would not break. Every Navy SEAL drill she had ever endured, Hell Week, long underwater swims, survival in freezing waters, had taught her the same lesson. The body can fail, but the mind remains a fortress if trained correctly. The captors grew increasingly frustrated, their strategies more desperate. They shouted, they dragged her around the room, and at one point even threatened her life. Sarah's calmness unnerved them. Every attempt to elicit fear, anger, or pleading failed. She remained unreadable, a rock in the storm. Internally, she reminded herself of the principles drilled into her: adapt, survive, endure, exploit weakness. Each insult, each blow, each manipulation became fuel for her plan. Mental flashbacks offered brief solace. She recalled instructors who had drilled into her the mantra, "Resilience is forged through extreme adversity." She remembered past missions, teammates lost and saved, and moments where failure had been an option, but not choice. These memories strengthened her resolve. She repeated them silently, drawing power from her past and the certainty of her training. Her captors' arrogance blinded them. They assumed her endurance had limits, but Sarah had long ago tested those boundaries and found them infinite. By midday, a subtle opportunity appeared. One of the guards became distracted, leaving the door slightly ajar for just a fraction of a second. Another shifted his weight, exposing a weakness in the restraints that bound her. Sarah's eyes flickered toward it, cataloging it without movement. Her body screamed from fatigue, but her mind leapt at the possibility. She began weaving a mental plan, timing, sequence, necessary actions. Every detail mattered. Every second of delay could mean failure or worse. The psychological torment was relentless. Captors alternated between cruelty and feigned kindness, trying to confuse and disorient her. They thought unpredictability could break her. They underestimated the Navy SEAL mindset. Predictable or chaotic, Sarah thrived in observation. She absorbed the pattern of their behavior like a sponge, converting torment into intelligence, fear into preparation. By late evening, she had created a clear, methodical strategy for survival, and if the opportunity arose, escape. As the second 72 hours drew to a close, Sarah lay quietly on the cold, damp floor, bruised and exhausted but mentally unstoppable. Her captors could sense frustration, confusion, and uncertainty creeping in. They had pushed her to the brink of physical collapse but had failed to touch her spirit. Inside, she whispered to herself, a mantra of survival: "They cannot break me. I will endure. I will overcome. I will survive." The true test was almost complete, and when the moment came, the captors would discover exactly why a Navy SEAL never breaks. The third day of captivity had arrived, and Sarah Mitchell's body protested with every movement. Her muscles were stiff, her joints swollen, and each breath burned in her chest. Hunger gnawed relentlessly, sleep had become a distant memory, and her hands were raw from hours of restraint. Yet inside, her mind was razor-sharp. Every second of torment, every insult, and every blow had been catalogued, studied, and analyzed. She had reached the edge of endurance, but there was no breaking her. In the Navy SEAL world, survival was not measured by comfort. It was forged in pain, sharpened by adversity, and tempered by unyielding mental control. Her captors sensed the tension. They had escalated everything: longer interrogations, harsher threats, physical aggression designed to provoke a reaction. They mocked her, alternating between cruel laughter and ominous silence, attempting to sow fear, confusion, and despair. But Sarah met every tactic with quiet defiance. She spoke nothing, revealing no hint of vulnerability, maintaining the appearance of total control even as her body screamed against her will. The more they tried to break her, the more they exposed their own flaws: impatience, arrogance, and overconfidence. Sarah's mind ran like a machine, calculating angles, timing, and opportunities. She recalled every SEAL training exercise, every mental toughness drill, every lesson drilled into her about patience, observation, and adaptation. She had learned to convert fear into focus, pain into strategy, and exhaustion into clarity. The 72-hour mark was approaching, a crucible she had survived before in controlled environments, but now it was real, dangerous, and deadly. And yet she felt a strange sense of calm. In every tormentor's mistake, she saw a way forward. In every misstep, she found a crack in the system. She began to test the captors subtly. A slight shift of her body, a measured grunt, even the smallest twitch, all were calculated to gauge reactions. She noticed one guard tended to glance away at specific intervals, distracted by his own frustrations. Another moved predictably after slapping her, leaving gaps in the chain of oversight. Every detail was filed away mentally, creating a map of opportunity. Sarah had learned that true endurance was not just survival, it was preparation, even under the most extreme conditions. Physical pain intensified, but Sarah adapted. She rotated her joints subtly, controlled her breathing to minimize fatigue, and focused on micro-rests. Hunger was constant, but she reframed it as a test of willpower. The captors assumed exhaustion would weaken her mind, but Sarah's mind was independent of her body's suffering. She whispered reminders to herself: endure, observe, adapt, survive. Each repetition reinforced her resolve, creating a mental barrier against fear and despair. She had been trained to endure hell, and this was just another trial, a real-world hell week, with consequences far higher than any training scenario. By midday, a critical observation emerged. One of the guards, overconfident and reckless, left a small latch slightly ajar while adjusting a surveillance camera. Another guard had grown frustrated, wandering close enough to be distracted by movement. Sarah's mind raced, connecting observations with action plans. Every SEAL drill she had learned about escape, evasion, and improvisation became a living, breathing blueprint in her mind. The moment for decisive action was approaching, and she had positioned herself perfectly to seize it. Psychological torment intensified further. Captors threatened death, feigned mercy, and even tried to confuse her with false stories of her team's demise. Some guards attempted to provoke emotional responses, hoping that grief or panic would break her will. Sarah did not flinch. Every tactic that could weaken the untrained mind had already failed on hers. She recognized their methods, predicted their moves, and remained several steps ahead. The unbreakable nature of a SEAL's training was not just physical, it was mental mastery under duress. As the final hours approached, Sarah silently prepared. Every nerve was on high alert, every movement calculated, every second precious. She had survived 72 hours of relentless torment, yet she remained unbroken. Her body was battered, her mind weary, but her resolve was absolute. The captors had believed they would witness the shattering of a human spirit. Instead, they had created a storm they did not understand. Sarah whispered quietly to herself, a mantra of survival. I endure, I adapt, I survive. They will see the truth soon. And in that moment the final piece fell into place. The seeds of opportunity had aligned, the unyielding strength of her mind was ready to turn the tables. She would endure not just for survival but for victory. The room was still, almost eerily so. Sarah Mitchell remained bound, bruised, and exhausted, yet her eyes glimmered with alert precision. Her captors had grown frustrated beyond measure. 3 days of unbroken silence, defiance, and endurance had left them confused, their confidence eroded. They believed they controlled the situation, but Sarah had been waiting, observing, calculating, and preparing. Every threat, every insult, every movement had fed her mind with the data she needed. Now, the time for patience was over, the time for action was near. She shifted subtly, testing the restraints again. Her body trembled from fatigue, but years of SEAL training had taught her to convert exhaustion into efficiency. She had memorized every gap in the guards' rotations, every lapse in attention. One of them, the younger and more arrogant of the two, had left a latch slightly ajar after adjusting the light. Another had grown careless, wandering closer than necessary to inspect her injuries. Sarah's mind worked in sequences, mapping steps to the smallest details. Timing, precision, and deception would be her allies. Her captors entered again, shouting threats meant to provoke fear or compliance. Sarah gave nothing. She remained silent, her posture calm, her gaze steady. The taller, bulkier man grew visibly agitated, throwing a chair to the side and slamming the floor with a boot. Every act of aggression was noted in Sarah's mind. They assumed that the beating or intimidation would weaken her, but in reality, it only sharpened her focus. She waited for the precise moment when their arrogance would reveal the tiniest opening, a moment small enough to exploit but powerful enough to change the game. Hours passed as Sarah continued her mental calculations. She visualized movements, escape routes, and contingencies. Every possible scenario played out in her mind at lightning speed. She rehearsed manipulating the restraints, disabling the latch, and creating distractions. Her body screamed for rest, yet she remained undeterred. In the SEAL world, endurance was measured not by comfort but by the ability to convert limitations into advantages. Pain and exhaustion were no longer obstacles, they were tools. The first subtle opportunity arrived when one guard moved closer than usual, checking her bindings for weakness. Sarah twisted her wrist just enough to test the rope's elasticity, noting the exact amount of give. Simultaneously, she kicked her foot toward a nearby piece of debris on the floor, nudging it slowly but deliberately toward a position that would later serve as a distraction. Every motion was calculated, measured, and nearly imperceptible. The captors, confident in their control, did not notice. Minutes later, she saw the larger man lean back, distracted by a conversation with his colleague. Her heart pounded, but her movements remained precise and controlled. Sarah had waited for this exact combination of carelessness and distraction. With a careful twist, she manipulated the restraints, loosening a knot she had been working on mentally for hours. Her breathing remained steady. The guard's attention wavered just long enough for her to gain a slight advantage. Psychological mastery was equally important. Sarah understood the value of perception. By remaining calm, silent, and composed, she unnerved her captors. Their frustration became visible in small gestures, tightening of the jaw, shifting feet, nervous glances. They were unaware that their own behavior had created the opportunity for her to strike. Her patience and observation had turned their strengths into weaknesses. As the day drew to a close, Sarah was ready. Every preparation, every observation, every ounce of endurance was now aligned for execution. She had created a map of the room, memorized the guards' positions, and prepared the moment to act. What they had intended as a demonstration of dominance had instead become the stage for her triumph. In the shadows of their overconfidence, she whispered silently to herself, "Endure, adapt, strike, survive." Every nerve, every muscle, every fragment of her mental discipline was poised for the next move. The captors had underestimated her, as they always did with those trained to survive the impossible. They were about to learn why a Navy SEAL never truly breaks. Sarah Mitchell's muscles tensed as the perfect moment arrived. The guards, overconfidence and exhaustion had created an opening. With precision born from years of Navy SEAL training, she twisted her restraints, freeing one wrist and then the other. Her body was battered, bruised, and aching, but her mind remained sharp, calculating every movement. One misstep could mean death, but she had spent 3 days preparing for this exact moment. The captors had tormented her, but they had also provided the tools for her victory: distraction, arrogance, and complacency. She moved like a shadow, careful not to make a sound. The debris she had nudged into place earlier became a perfect diversion. As one guard bent down to inspect it, Sarah slipped behind a support beam, holding her breath as she calculated her next move. Her eyes flicked to the other guard, whose attention was divided. Timing was everything. One wrong move, one careless twitch, and the fight would be over before it began. But Sarah thrived under pressure. Her entire life had prepared her for this moment. The first strike was swift. Using the element of surprise, she incapacitated the distracted guard with a precise blow, knocking him unconscious without alerting the other. Every movement was controlled and deliberate, conserving energy and exploiting weakness. The larger man turned, sensing something, but Sarah was already moving toward the partially open door she had identified days ago. Her captors had underestimated her, not just her physical strength, but her ability to anticipate, adapt, and exploit every flaw in their operation. Outside the cell, the hallways were narrow and dimly lit, filled with the oppressive smell of sweat and damp stone. Sarah moved quickly but quietly, her senses heightened, every shadow a potential threat. She noted the patterns she had observed for hours: the timing of guard rotations, the locations of cameras, the points of vulnerability in their perimeter. This was not just an escape, it was a tactical operation. Every decision counted. Every second mattered. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. One of the remaining guards had discovered the first body. Sarah pivoted, using a combination of hand-to-hand combat skills and precise strikes to neutralize him silently. The battle was brief but decisive. Her movements were fluid, trained, and unrelenting. She had endured 3 days of psychological and physical torment, and now she was turning that endurance into action. Pain and exhaustion were no longer obstacles, they were fuel. As she reached the outer perimeter, Sarah signaled subtly to her team, who had been tracking her movements and preparing for extraction. Within moments, coordinated support arrived. SEAL teammates moved with lethal efficiency, securing the area, neutralizing the remaining threats, and clearing a path for extraction. The captors, arrogant and overconfident, had underestimated the unbreakable strength of a Navy SEAL. Their shock was palpable as their carefully orchestrated ambush crumbled under Sarah's resilience, strategy, and execution. The extraction zone was near, a small clearing where a helicopter waited silently, rotors humming. Sarah sprinted the final meters, adrenaline coursing through her veins, each step bringing her closer to freedom. Her team fell in formation around her, providing cover, moving with the precision of professionals who had trained together countless times. In that moment, Sarah's torment had transformed into triumph. She had survived the impossible, endured 72 hours of relentless torment, and turned the tables on her captors with skill, patience, and courage. As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah exhaled, a rare moment of release washing over her. Below, the captors were left stunned, defeated, and humiliated. They had believed that physical pain and psychological terror could break a human spirit. Instead, they had created an adversary who was calm, calculated, and deadly. Sarah's body was battered, but her mind was victorious. Every insult, every threat, every attempt to break her had been absorbed, transformed into strategy, and ultimately into survival. Inside the helicopter, her team checked on her injuries while she silently reviewed every moment of the operation. She felt pride, satisfaction, and a deep understanding of her own strength. 3 days of torment had proven more than endurance. It had revealed the power of discipline, mental fortitude, and tactical mastery. She had been tested to her limits, and she had survived. And for anyone who had doubted her, the message was clear: a Navy SEAL never breaks. The helicopter lifted off, cutting through the darkened sky as Sarah Mitchell leaned back, finally allowing herself a moment to breathe. Her body ached in every joint, every bruise screamed in protest, and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But her mind was alert, sharp, and unbroken. Around her, her team moved with practiced efficiency, checking equipment, scanning the perimeter, and ensuring their extraction went smoothly. Their expressions were a mixture of relief, awe, and unspoken admiration. They had witnessed her survival, her resilience, and now they understood fully why a Navy SEAL never breaks. Sarah's eyes wandered to the dense jungle below. The same jungle that had been her prison, the stage of her torment, now seemed smaller, conquered by her will. She remembered every detail: the harsh words of her captors, the manipulations, the exhaustion, the hunger, the relentless psychological games. Each of these challenges had been met with calm, patience, and precision. In her mind, she replayed the moments where observation turned into opportunity, where endurance became strategy. She realized that the torment she had endured had been both a test and a teacher. Her team checked her for injuries. Minor cuts, bruises, and raw wrists were present, but nothing life-threatening. Medics would treat the wounds, but they were superficial compared to the real ordeal she had faced. Sarah refused to dwell on pain. Instead, she focused on lessons learned. Her resilience was not just a personal victory, it was a testament to the power of preparation, discipline, and mental strength. The hours of observation, patience, and silent endurance had turned what could have been defeat into triumph. As she allowed herself a small sip of water, Sarah reflected on the paradox of the ordeal. Her captors had believed they could crush her spirit, that relentless abuse would force compliance or surrender. Yet in every insult and every blow, she had discovered opportunities. In every moment of discomfort, she had found clarity. The human mind, when trained and disciplined, could withstand far more than the body alone suggested. Pain, fear, and fatigue were tools, not masters. And she had mastered them all. The helicopter began its descent toward a forward operating base. Sarah gazed at the horizon, the first hints of dawn brushing the sky with pale gold. The world felt renewed, full of possibility. She thought about her team, the men who had risked their lives, trusted her skill, and now shared in the victory. She thought about the lessons she would carry forward, the importance of patience, observation, and maintaining calm under extreme duress. And she thought about her own limits, now proven to be far beyond what even she had imagined. Once on the base, the debrief began. Intelligence officers wanted details about the operation, the enemy's tactics, and any information that could prevent future threats. Sarah gave concise, precise answers. Every word was measured. She revealed only what was necessary. Her experience had taught her that even after victory, caution was paramount. But underneath the professionalism was quiet pride. the satisfaction of knowing she had endured the unthinkable, survived, and emerged stronger. As the day progressed, Sarah found a moment of solitude. Sitting quietly, she reflected on what it meant to be unbreakable. Navy SEALs are forged in fire, trained in discomfort, and tested in extremes. But beyond physical skill, endurance is mental. The refusal to yield, the ability to transform adversity into advantage, the unwavering commitment to survive against impossible odds. She had lived those principles in their harshest form. And yet, as she considered the ordeal, she also understood its deeper significance. Strength was not just about surviving torment. It was about maintaining integrity, control, and clarity of mind under pressure. Her body might have been battered, but her spirit had remained untouchable. The captors had underestimated her, believing brutality would bend her. They had discovered too late that the mind of a Navy SEAL is beyond ordinary breaking points. As night fell over the base, Sarah prepared for the next mission. Her body needed recovery, but her mind was already alert, focused, and ready. She had been tested, tormented, and challenged in ways most people could never imagine, and she had survived. She was a survivor, a warrior, and a testament to human resilience. The world had tried to break her and failed. In that quiet moment, she whispered to herself, a mantra she had lived by for 3 grueling days. Endure, adapt, survive. I am unbreakable. And with that, she stood, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that no torment, no adversity, no enemy could ever shatter the spirit of a Navy SEAL.